All right. Good morning, everybody. Happy Friday, and thank you for ending your week with us as we learn about finding and retaining volunteers from our expert, Hannah Stoll, which is really quite appropriate as we head into the home stretch of National Volunteer Month. Before we begin today's webinar, I have a couple of quick housekeeping items. Number one, the webinar is being recorded, and all participants and registries will receive a link to the recording in a few days. And number two, we will be using the Q&A button, which is at the bottom of your screen today, to submit questions that you may have. We will be holding questions and answering them at the end of the presentation. With that, we'll get everything started here. My name is Peter Benson. I am the Senior VP of Treasury Services at Park Bank, where I lead our Treasury Services and Community Engagement teams. And I am thrilled to be joined today by Hannah Stoll, Director of Corporate and Community Engagement for United Way of Dane County. For those who may not be aware, United Way of Dane County helps individuals and organizations create meaningful experiences year-round. Hannah has over 15 years of experience with volunteering and with leading volunteers. And she started with the United Way of Dane County in 2018 and now leads the Volunteer Center for Dane County. Hannah enjoys helping volunteers understand how valuable their donated time and expertise is when thinking about solving larger issues. And she is eager to help all of you find ways to recruit and retain amazing volunteers. With that, I am really pleased to welcome Hannah, and I will turn the presentation over to her. Thanks, Hannah.
Thank you, Peter. I'm super excited to be here. So I don't want to waste too much time. Let's dive right in. So here is a quick overview of what we'll chat about today. So appealing to volunteers, defining your need, recruitment, and then retainment 101. And before we get into that, Peter just gave a brief overview of United Way, but I want to dive just a smidge deeper so that we all can recognize kind of what role I play and what role United Way plays and why I'm even here talking to you all today. So here at United Way, we often like to think of ourselves as the intersection. We are the place where all of these different folks, organizations, businesses, entities in our community can come together to really see that change of lives. So recognizing that it's not a one person gig, it takes a lot of folks to make those changes happen, and recognizing too that through all of this work, we're acknowledging and addressing those today urgent needs so that we can have a better tomorrow. So here at United Way of Dane County, we have what we call our plan for community well-being. So here's just a quick run through of what that really entails. And if you've been involved with United Way in the past or in the recent past, at least, some of these terms might look a little different. We're working on refreshing them so that they can better reflect the work that we do in our community. So we recognize that family well-being equals community well-being. So when you see and look at these terms, just recognize that these apply to everyone of all ages. So healthy communities, right? Again, recognizing that even prior to birth, you have to have a proper health relationship and all those resources. Youth opportunities, so really wanting to help youth realize what full potential they have so that they can feel supported in that. And then financial security, again, recognizing that money makes the world go round and you need to have that financial security to live a stable and secure life. And then community resiliency. So this, again, is recognizing those urgent needs that we have in our community, addressing them with all of those groups that were recognized in that previous slide. And then ultimately, that'll lead us to a better tomorrow. So diving in, right, appealing to volunteers. So I like to think of this as your volunteer's sales pitch. So your mission's or your organization's mission plus your why is ultimately your volunteer sales pitch. So when you think about why you started in your role, right? You're here on this webinar because you're probably working for an organization that needs volunteers. And so how did you get here, right? Are you passionate about the work? Are you eager to solve the problem that your organization, is fighting for? Whatever those questions might be, that'll help you get to that why. So when I think about my why at United Way, it's easy to get behind this plan for community well-being. And my why, excuse me, is ultimately that I want everyone to have access to this stable and secure life, right? So recognizing things like education, income, health, those are crucial to those successful lives that we can provide for folks. So here's just a few snapshots. Marketing pulled a bunch of photos of me, which was really awkward, but wanting to share a few of my volunteer experiences. So on the left here, that is a photo from our community kickoff, which happens in August. Last year it was at Breeze Stevens, and we packed 4,000 paper product packs. We call them impacts. So those are 3 rolls of toilet paper and a roll of paper towels. So when you think about 4,000 of those, that's a lot of paper products. So it took about 600 or so volunteers to make that happen. In the middle there, that is from our back to school bash, which is coming up in June. Oh my gosh, school's starting already. It's crazy. But those are backpacks that we fill with school supplies. And again, takes a lot of organizations in doing donation drives. And then day of, obviously, we need volunteers to help pack those. And then on the far right, that's a little bit of an older photo, but recognizing that even during COVID, especially during COVID, the volunteers that we needed support from just to make sure that resources were getting out into the community to help organizations that were still trying to provide those resources during a pandemic. So getting into what is your need. So narrowing down on your needs, right? Once you have that why, that sales pitch, it's easier to craft your ask. So when you think about the volunteer needs that your organization has, think about whether it might be a reoccurring volunteer need, if it's a skill-based volunteer need, or if it's something that you need a long-term committed volunteer for, right? So once you have all of those answers to those questions and you've narrowed down on it, there's a few ways that you can help make those asks. So one thing is obviously, if it's a skill-based volunteer, don't be afraid to ask companies with those hot commodity skill sets. You never know who's going to say yes. As far as reoccurring and long-term volunteer needs go, I'm a firm believer in the fact that you can sell anything that you're passionate about. So when I think about recruiting volunteers for United Way, what are those things that get me excited, right? So it's the real-time support that volunteers offer. It's the real-time meeting those needs that volunteers offer. And then ultimately, I get excited about the educational aspect of it all, right? So when you can help volunteers connect the dots of this overall picture, your organization didn't just sprout out of nowhere. You're not created for no reason. So once you have those needs and you can craft your ask, then you can really kind of help connect, like I said, connect those dots for volunteers and ultimately have them opt in on the bigger picture and the bigger solution. So here at United Way, we offer, and a lot of United Ways actually offer these on-site packing projects. So really wanting to, again, connect the dots, right? So making a difference and making an impact. Volunteers want to know that the time they're giving is actually making that difference, and that you're not just giving them the busy work that no one else wanted to do from the staff, things like that. So we recognize too that a lot of companies struggle to encourage maybe or get those buy-ins from employees to go out and volunteer. And you do start to see things like volunteer time off policies. And we are always encouraging companies to consider those benefits, and recognizing too that, volunteerism is great for personal and professional development. Just earlier this week, actually, I gave another presentation on all of the different benefits and studies that show and prove that volunteerism can improve your mental health. It can build your overall community engagement, and recognizing that you are a part of a larger picture when thinking about how you're involved in your community. It can sharpen skills that maybe you already have. It can teach you skills that you might not know you have. And then also it can help network and bring you closer to folks that you might not know yet. And so For us at United Way of Dane County, we put together what we call our engagement menu. So these were stemmed from conversations with our nonprofit and community partners, basically asking them, if you could receive a truckload of something, what would really rock your socks off kind of conversation. And it wasn't a surprise necessarily, but a lot of those things were simple and essential supplies. So if you feel so led, you can scan the QR code in the corner and that'll show you our engagement menu. But thinking of things like diapers and paper products, menstrual hygiene products, snack packs, things like that. And so from those conversations, we took it back to our corporate partners who really wanted their employees to be involved in volunteering and basically said, here's what the community has as far as needs go. Can your company help sponsor the cost of these supplies? And then we'll have an on-site packing project for your employees. And then you can know and trust that these supplies are going directly back to the community to be distributed. So it's a win-win-win when you see the full scope of it all. But like I said, it's just a matter of catering those needs that your organization might have. And then also being very clear and direct with what your needs are so that companies and individuals can know what they're signing up for and how they might be able to help. So recruitment, this I think is the part that most folks might feel a little intimidated by, but we're here to help. So United Way of Dane County, our team runs the Volunteer Center. So this QR code will take you to our website, volunteeryourtime.org. If you're not familiar with the site, it is extremely user-friendly. I think of it kind of like a Facebook-esque type of website. So it's a hub of all volunteer and donation needs for Dane County. And then also, if you're outside of Dane County, United Way Wisconsin also has a platform very similar. So we can help you get set up with that. All of the organizations that are on our website have the access to post and promote their volunteer and donation needs on the site. So when you see the homepage, at least from the mobile version, you'll see really easily from a user's perspective that it's super simple to just click volunteer now, and it'll populate all sorts of volunteer opportunities in Dane County. And then you can even filter from a user's perspective by dates, times, location, interest, all of that jazz. So really we want all the organizations who are needing volunteers to please make an agency account so that we can promote your volunteer needs year-round. United Way is promoting volunteeryourtime.org, not just on our socials, but in newsletters and emails that go out to a bunch of our committees and affinity groups. I'll talk more about those guys later. So all that to say, please don't suffer in silence. Post your needs on Volunteer Your Time. Our team is here to help recruit volunteers for you. So who and how are you asking? So thinking about Volunteer Your Time, right? So you've got your post made, it's out for the public to see and to respond to. I wanted to touch base just briefly on some of our volunteer networks here at United Way of Dane County. So Business Volunteer Network, that is a group of representatives from companies that have some sort of corporate social responsibility goals and or they're eager to have their employees out and volunteering. So we work closely with those guys just to, again, promote volunteer needs and schedule volunteer opportunities for them to kind of sample out opportunities that are in the community. And then if they enjoy it, the goal is to go back to their companies and to recruit volunteers for future projects. Running kind of similarly is our LINK, Lead Impact Network and Change. That's our young professionals group. So they're also out and volunteering a lot. Next is Ready. So retired employees are dedicated individuals. To no one's surprise, that is our retiree group. And that group is volunteering multiple times a month. So please, again, emphasis on let us know what your volunteer needs are through Volunteer Your Time so we can promote them through these groups. And then last but definitely not least is our Women United group that they focus primarily on education, but that is a powerhouse of a group for sure. So between these four networks, we really have quite a wide net cast for promotion of volunteer needs. So again, don't suffer in silence. And then I also wanted to touch base on social media. Again, this might feel a little intimidating to some folks, but there's so much power in social media. So please, please, please post on social media. That's where a lot of folks get their news. That's where folks hear about what's going on around the community. So don't be afraid to post on social media. There's also a few local Facebook groups that I find a lot of traction in. One being Dane County's Neighbors Helping Neighbors. I don't know off the top of my head how large that group is, but it's thousands of people. So don't leave out social media. There's a ton of networks to be reached that way. And then also, again, just looping back on those direct asks, right? So if your organization has one in particular, I think about those skill-based volunteer needs, right? So if you have something like, we hear a lot about project management support and or HR support and or, financial skills that people might have. There's a ton of things that folks just don't know, that their day-to-day knowledge, their day-to-day to-dos might be a really hot commodity skill set for a nonprofit or organization. So don't be afraid to make those direct asks. One, you never know who will say yes. That's usually the mindset I have. And then also, I know it's cliche, but what's the worst they could say is no. So just ask, couldn't hurt. Retainment 101. So this one, I do encourage everyone to personalize this for you and your organization and your personality as well. We're all different people and volunteers are the same, but these are a few points that I find to be consistent across the board. So one is just being kind and authentic. Please don't put on a facade for volunteers. I mean, you're happy to be where you are or else you wouldn't be here. You're passionate about what you do or else you wouldn't be here. And so volunteers can really feel and sense that. So I always encourage volunteer coordinators, managers, anyone of the sort to just be kind and be authentic. It goes so far. Another one is communication is key. And again, I feel like this sounds really cliche, but I usually tell folks communicate and then do it 3 times more. So when a volunteer first responds or expresses interest in a volunteer need, obviously follow up and introduce yourselves, share contact info for the day of, things like that. Another touch point is, leading up to the project, a friendly little reminder, sharing any sort of unique information as far as, what to wear, where to park, the door you should come through, simple things that, again, might seem mundane to you. They really can change and affect a volunteer's experience. So think about those things. And then usually week of or day before, really close to the project, I always try to, again, just send out one more friendly reminder. And usually that's when I'll pass along, if it's best or appropriate to have my cell phone number day of. I'm probably not going to be online because we're going to be volunteering. So again, just tying up those knots day before, again, just super close to the project as a friendly reminder, never hurt. Training and onboarding. So this, I feel like, when I was creating this presentation, we recently hired some new staff on my team. So I've been feeling this whole training and onboarding and how critical it is and how important it is, and also how time consuming and energy consuming it can be. But I also have been recognizing how critical it is to take the time to train and to onboard well. And then at the same time, I only hired 2 new people, right? Imagine groups of people like volunteers. I would be seeking out ways to make that more efficient 100% as soon as possible. So when you think about training and onboarding, and definitely recognizing that it varies per organization, but think about ways that you might be able to make it more efficient, right? So I know we've got nonprofit partners that will streamline all of their group orientations to be on this day of each week or this day of each month. And that's where they can really, mass produce these volunteer groups kind of thing. And then also, it just takes a lot of patience while folks are learning. So kind of looping back to that first bullet of being kind, I should have tossed in be patient, but really those go so far. So I'm happy to answer questions as my team is learning. And there are definitely moments where I don't have the thoughts to give, but I can say that, and I can tell them that I might not have the answer right now, or I can loop back later, but even that transparency really builds that relationship. Going into empowerment and development. So this kind of like is the next step after training and onboarding in my mind. So empowerment and development, as volunteers are getting more acclimated and adjusted to their role, feel encouraged to empower them, right? What skills are you seeing out of these volunteers? Is it something that might be able to benefit you further down the road, right? So if you've got a volunteer that, wow, they have great leadership skills, they love teaching, or they love speaking, or they love this and that, they're really great at it, maybe they can help you train and onboard future volunteers. I know that at United Way, it's often tossed around like, just, have a volunteer help you, have a volunteer help you. It's easier said than done. But when you have those few and far between, sometimes, unfortunately, volunteers that really stand out and you can see that they have skills that you need and you can utilize, feel encouraged to empower them, because ultimately that will develop them. And that kind of comes back to the skill sets and the personal and professional development that can come from volunteering. And ultimately, those are the things that show in studies to be helpful for our overall improvement of our mental and health and well-being. So last but definitely not least is to celebrate, right? Again, sometimes this is easier said than done, but through my experience, I have found that a lot of volunteers don't want anything flashy. So keeping it simple actually is easy enough. I can do that. So simple things like handwritten notes. I mean, it seems old school, but it goes really far for a lot of folks. I love coffee dates. I love taking volunteers out to lunch. And again, just being extra grateful. I toss around the term attitude of gratitude a lot because one, that's just how it gets me. That's a term that gets me through really hard days sometimes, but then also recognizing that an attitude of gratitude, it speaks volumes to people, right? Whether this is somebody who's a new volunteer or somebody who's been volunteering for years, whatever the case, people are just grateful to be appreciated. And so don't skimp out on thanking folks. I doubt that you are, but just wanted to overemphasize the importance of celebrating individuals. So that's the spiel. I feel like I just blew through it, but that's perfect because we've got time for Q&A. So Peter, I will toss it back to you.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Hannah. That's a lot of information. You did kind of give us a lot in a little bit of time. We do have some questions out there, and for other people who are participating, please do not be shy. If you have any sort of question, there is, as they say, no bad questions, right? So I'm going to get us started here. Tim is wondering, how do we reach out to recruit ready volunteers?
Yes. So we just had a new website launch. So check out our website. It'll be under one of our volunteer tabs. And if you can't find it, for any questions that don't get answered during this, I should have put this on the slide. You can email volunteer@uwdc, as in United Way Dane County.org. So definitely check out our website for any of those affinity groups or volunteer networks.
Fantastic. We have another question. Do you have any kind of stats you can share on how effective listing things on Volunteer Your Time is? Like, how likely are we to get responses if we utilize that?
Off the top of my head, I don't have the stats per se, but there are a few best practices that we encourage organizations to keep in mind. So one thing is, when posting volunteer opportunities, especially if you're an organization that has had a page for a while and has had posts out there for a while, a best practice that we really encourage is to get in there and to update the post on a regular basis. Essentially, when you post, it gets populated to the top of the list, but if you don't update it on a regular basis, it can easily get buried amongst new posts that are being created. So definitely keep it updated is something I would advise, and that really does help. And then lastly, I'd add too, if you feel like you're not getting the recruitment that you're hoping for, feel free to send the volunteer time link to that volunteer@uwdc.org, and we'll see if we can't promote it on our socials and or again through those networks, because they're all volunteering on different cadences, and newsletters are also on different cadences, but we can almost always promote it somewhere. So don't suffer in silence if you have a post out there that isn't getting the traction you were hoping for.
Excellent. I actually have a follow-up to that, based on your answer. Do you happen to know, like, round numbers, how many partner agencies are utilizing volunteer your time?
Yeah, so we have over 400 nonprofits and community organizations that post on volunteer time. And then as far as users go, it's about 14,000. And again, the activity varies per user, but there's definitely plenty of folks that are using the site. And then, like I said, we put a lot of promotion year round to volunteer time, not just on our socials, but like I mentioned, in newsletters and things as well. So hopefully it's a platform that folks are still always going to be continuing to be familiar with. And then that way it's a one-stop shop for everyone.
Fantastic, thank you.
Mhm.
Laura is wondering if you have any tips for volunteer recruiters that don't do the training. Um, how do you kind of have a consistent volunteer experience across service areas when you can't do all of the pieces for the volunteers?
Yeah, I think it's kind of tricky to answer that without more context. So Laura, maybe I don't know which organization you're with, but I'd love to chat more. I think that is a challenge, right? Of like, how can I ensure that this volunteer is going to have a good experience after I pass them off to the next person that they're going to be helping? And I think that, it varies per organization, like I mentioned. And I think, one thing that works well, I can say for us at United Way is that we're all saying the same thing, even though we're saying it maybe differently based off of our roles at United Way or our personalities or just how our work styles are. So I have confidence in knowing that, okay, even if I pass off one of my volunteers to someone in a totally different department, their skill sets are still going to be utilized. And then also they might just learn something new about our organization. It's still going to be the same messaging. The experience itself will probably vary. Again, you're probably going to be working on a different project. But I know and trust that all of us staff at United Way have the same passions, again, because we wouldn't be here if we weren't. And then also that our United Way message is consistent across the board. So the customer service, as far as that experience goes, may vary. I'm not saying that anyone at United Way is going to treat a volunteer poorly. But again, just recognizing people's work styles are a little different. So I would say too that takes some internal conversations, oftentimes just between staff. I hope I'm answering this question correctly, but like I would never pass along a volunteer to someone else without touching base with that staff member and letting them know at least a little bit about this volunteer, and what their interests are, skills are, and how they might be helpful to that project or that group. I hope I answered that correctly.
It looks like Laura says that you have. She said that
Oh,
makes sense, and thank you.
thank you, Laura. Thank you.
Um, do you have any unique ways that people could consider recognizing volunteers that they may not have considered?
Unique ways. I feel like everyone's always trying to figure out unique ways, but I'm also kind of a believer of like, if it's not broken, don't fix it. And I think too that, like I mentioned, some volunteers, you have to gauge them, right? Like some volunteers don't want any flashy recognition. When I first started at United Way, we were putting on this huge volunteer award ceremony. And so many volunteers that we were recognized, not so many, there would every year there'd be a small handful of folks who would receive an award and they didn't want it, they didn't show up to receive it because they didn't want that flashy recognition. So I think it varies per volunteer, right? And one thing I would say is if you want to do something flashy, not saying that you shouldn't, I'm just saying if you feel like you don't have the resources for an award or a dinner or something along those lines, consider asking for sponsorships. That kind of comes back to those direct asks. And I know it might not fit for this webinar per se, but whoever that employee, that volunteer, if they're working, that company of that employee might want to recognize this hard work, the good deeds that this employee is doing. So think about asking for sponsorships, because again, you don't know who's going to say yes. And in the grand scheme of costs for a company to recognize an employee, a small award that, those aren't always cheap, but they would be happy to drop a few coins in that bucket for that award to recognize the employees. So that's a couple of thoughts that I had. But yeah, it really does vary, I'll say.
Perfect. Do you think that volunteer surveys are helpful to gauge engagement? And what
Yes.
type of questions do you recommend asking?
Yes. Survey. You can never have too much feedback. But also talking about what kind of questions, I feel like, I'll try to keep this quick. For United Way, usually if it's like post-project, that's a one type of survey. If it's a committee member or something a little more long-term, that's a different type of survey. So I'm sorry that it varies in every area, but think about things like rating your experience. Did you learn anything new today? Was there something that, would have improved your experience? And also quotes, asking for real-time stories from volunteers if they've had good experiences, because again, that's going to help you pitch that sales pitch that we were talking about. So I'm a huge fan of feedback and huge fan of surveys, so don't hesitate to do that.
Perfect. That makes a lot of sense to me. Um, okay, we have a couple that I think are a little more interesting from my perspective, things I hadn't considered. How do we weed out volunteers who may only be showing up for swag? How do we get people who are really focused on helping the cause?
Yeah. Yeah, that I could see how you see that as out of context, but I totally know what you mean. Back to the sales pitch and or your passion points, right? So if I feel like somebody is just volunteering for United Way for the swag, they clearly have missed the point, right? We're not here to pat ourselves on the back. We're not here to, we are here to feel good, right? Like the work you're doing is important and it makes a difference. But recognizing too that there must have been something missing from the mission to yours and your why, and to how this volunteer has gotten so off target. So don't take it personally. It might just be a needing of like backtracking to revisit what the premise is and what we're trying to accomplish. And I do feel like so often volunteers just it's just a miscommunication or a misunderstanding. And I tell folks a lot, if we don't feel like if this volunteer is not a good fit, or if the volunteer doesn't feel like this is a good fit, it's totally okay. There's so many volunteer opportunities out there. And to really be strategic with how you're investing your time when thinking about onboarding and training folks too. So you don't want to waste your time and your resources on somebody who's misunderstanding the whole premise of what we're here to accomplish. So it might be a harder conversation because, again, no one wants to hear that it's not a good fit, but reassure everyone that there are plenty of other opportunities to give back your time. I hope I answered that correctly as well.
I think you did. You actually answered another one that that is out there. Maybe I'm going to expand on that a little. Like, do you have any specific tips about having the hard conversation when people may not be the best fit, when they volunteer, but they're not doing the right thing they volunteered for, but they don't really want to move on from that volunteer opportunity?
Yeah, it's so hard to have those conversations. I think I always go back to that original bullet point of being kind and being authentic, right? So, all of my volunteers know that, well, and I'll pause myself, and I know we're over time, but pause myself and say that kindness does not equal niceness. Okay, we can talk more about that another day. But when I say being kind and being authentic, all of my volunteers know that my intentions are always as pure as they could possibly be. I would never be mean to any of my volunteers, but they do understand that what we're here to do is X, Y, and Z. And so just kind of like whenever those tougher conversations do have to come up, again, hopefully the volunteer knows this about you, is that you're kind and you're authentic, and you wouldn't say it, you wouldn't bring it up if it were gonna, really hinder what we were trying to do. But the reality is that the hindering is already it's already happening. So we got to get out of this rut. And I think too that when I have these conversations, few and far between, doesn't happen often, but that volunteers know that my intentions are pure, my goal is this, and here's how I think we can get there. I also don't like coming to the table with problems and no solutions. So if you're having these conversations with somebody who's not a good fit, try to brainstorm other places that maybe you can plug them in, or yeah, I mean, really that's ideal, is that, okay, this isn't a good fit, but what about X, Y, and Z? That way folks don't feel like you're just snipping them off and tossing them to the wolves.
Yeah, those are definitely hard conversations to repurpose people or redirect. Chris is wondering if you have any suggestions for the basic elements that should be included in a volunteer onboarding and training.
Um, Basic elements. Yeah, I mean, like I said, I try to give a quick 101 here today about United Way, but our volunteer orientation presentation, that's a mouthful. It goes really deep actually into the ins and outs of United Way. So per organization, don't feel like you have to do it like we do it, but again, I find that over communicating of it all really helps volunteers see the larger picture, and especially at an organization like United Way, that if we just do so much, it's like almost too much, but it's all within reason, and we all try to help how we can. And so it really helps volunteers connect those larger pictures and then really narrow in on the micro of what their role is in this larger scheme of projects and people and committees and all of that. And then also, you know, year round when we're on site with our company partners, whenever we're packing those supplies, really wanting to make sure that they know that we're not just surrounded by paper towels and toilet paper for no reason, but like recognizing the need. And then also how we got to this point, right? Your company sponsored the cost of these supplies so that your employees can have this project that's super accessible. And then again, closing the loop with recognizing that these are going to go directly to our nonprofit partners, and it's a win-win-win. It's a full circle. So I love the educational aspect of it. And I think that really helps when thinking about training and onboarding. Don't be shy to overshare about your organization. And I think too, that helps weed out anybody who might not be a good fit.
Interesting. I guess I hadn't thought about it like that.
Mhm.
But it does make sense. The more you share, the more you can show the impact up front, the more likely that people will, you know, really buy in and be engaged and helpful.
Yeah.
I have kind of a bigger picture question for you that I'm totally surprising you with, so I understand if you don't have an answer ready. Are you seeing any demographic trends that organizations that rely on volunteers need to be aware of and need to kind of use different tactics, or address different segments, different demographic groups differently to be effective?
Wow, that is a big question, Peter. You weren't joking. The reality is that volunteerism has been on a decline since COVID, since 2020. And really 2020 drastically changed the demographics of volunteers and all things volunteerism, how things had to run and who was able to help. So pre-COVID, a lot of retirees were carrying the weight of volunteerism. And then during 2020, when retirees were now a very vulnerable population and they were being encouraged to not go out and not help, not volunteer, a lot of nonprofits and community organizations really had to re-envision how we were going to get the job done, whether it was a food pantry needing to switch to, curbside drive-through type of pickups, whether it was, nonprofits that serve homebound individuals, and just how we could cross paths with volunteers these days. So I would say one thing that we're trying to lean more into, and it's kind of, I'm a little embarrassed to say that we haven't gotten there already, but really wanting to lean on our younger volunteers. So nowadays, I mean, schools, I was talking with someone recently, a staff member that has a 12-year-old that I don't know if it was the school or the program their child was in, but needed like 100 hours or something for volunteering for some badge or award. It's the same across the board, starting really, really young. And then even to having conversations furthermore with the university and at Madison College, and how we can get students in college that are maybe again thinking about those skill set volunteers, right? So trying to get a better sense of how we can engage young volunteers, because they're the future. And not only are they the future, but they have these required volunteer hours they need to meet. So really streamlining our needs to those younger audience, I think, is one thing that United Way is trying to leverage all of our nonprofit partners and kind of condense everyone's needs so that we can streamline it to not just the volunteer networks that we mentioned earlier, but again, some of the younger volunteers that have those required hours they need to meet, wanting them to have those opportunities as well, paired with the harsh reality that finding volunteer opportunities for youth can be really challenging, right? Like not all of these opportunities can be done by a student. But if there's a creative way a loophole in the sense that you can MacGyver a volunteer opportunity that a student can be empowered, right? To utilize their skills, to grow their skills, to get the job done. There's always something that a student can do. We just maybe haven't thought of it yet. And so I think talking demographic wise, yeah, COVID really changed a lot. And retirees are definitely back out there volunteering, but at the same time too, I think that we can see that we've lost a chunk of volunteers that are retired because COVID was a break for them. It was a moment of like, hey, maybe I can, kick back and relax for now, or maybe I can go and travel now, or maybe I can go and spend time with people I haven't seen that I love, or something like that. So the demographic has definitely changed from my perspective, at least.
Okay, I'm not sure if I should be thanking you for that or not, but I appreciate that you recognize that and you're sharing it with our participants so that they can think about what their opportunities are and how to make them more relevant, more attractive, more doable for younger people. I think that's an important thing to consider.
Yeah, just don't write off the young folks, I say. They'll surprise you.
Fantastic. I don't have any more questions out there waiting for you, Hannah. So
Okay.
with that, I would like to thank the United Way of Dane County for all the work that your organization does in trying to develop volunteer opportunities and to help our community try to achieve some really, really big solutions to broad challenges. I think you guys bite off a lot, and I appreciate that you're willing to do that and you're trying to do that. And I also appreciate you being willing to share your time, your knowledge, your expertise around this particular topic, which is really important. Volunteers are the lifeblood of many of our nonprofit organizations, almost all of them. So what you are doing is incredibly important, and we appreciate that, and we appreciate you taking time to share what you know about it and how you can help our community partners as we go forward. So thank you, Hannah.
Thank you. And thank you, Park Bank, for having me and for convening so many awesome organizations. I am grateful to be here and I am super excited. One thing our marketing folks would shame me for not plugging is our social media. So if you don't follow us already, please do. I am also trying to build my LinkedIn network, so a shameless plug for that. And like I mentioned, if you've got any questions that weren't answered or any that come up after our webinar here today, don't hesitate to reach out. We would be more than happy to, again, go out on a coffee date or have a virtual meeting to chat more about how we can support you, your volunteer programs, and get you the help that you need.
Fantastic. And people can find you right there. That was the last piece I was looking for.
Yeah. Didn't expect to wear the same shirt today. That's weird. All right.
We like consistency as bankers, so I think
There
it's
you go. That's perfect.
Hannah,
Well,
thank
thanks
you so
again.
much. Yeah, this has been fantastic. Thank you. And to all of our participants, thank you for taking time to be with us on a Friday morning. I hope your weekend goes well, and we hope to see you next month for our next webinar presentation. Thank you so much.